Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another STAMPtember exclusive. Today's collaboration release is with Paper Rose Studio, and it is the All the Thanks stamp set. Love it. Before I get to that, with all of the limited edition exclusives, they are one and done. When they sell out, they are not restocked. I will have a link to the Paper Rose Studio products in their regular line. That'll be linked in my blog post directly below the video, as well as links to this set and the supplies I used. So I love this set. I love making thank you cards. I think it's kind of obvious. Most of the cards I post are thank you cards. And this one with the big sentiments. And I just, this little like vine sort of image, fell in love with it. So I have Neenah Desert Storm cardstock in my MISTI. I inked up the stamp with VersaFine Clair Fallen Leaves ink. I left the image in my MISTI. And then I'm painting it with my Distress watercolor pencils that I put the shavings into a palette. I just posted a video a couple days ago. I'll link to that at the end of this one if you've missed it. You could also just color with the watercolor pencils, like directly paint that way, or hold the pencil, use your water brush, whatever floats your boat, however it works for you. I'm just really liking this palette. It works. And as always, my go-to favorite, I love things like this on top of Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. It just, again, chef's kiss. So really simple painting. I kind of sped through this with editing, but it was legit, just super simple painting. And then once it was dry, I restamped the image. With this, it's not as necessary to restamp. You could always leave it, but because these watercolor pencils have pigment in them, and that's why the color is able to show up so nicely on darker cardstocks, it does somewhat cover whatever you've stamped. Again, it would depend on the image and all those things, but I like restamping it afterwards because it does bring out all the detail again of the stamped image and just makes everything crisp. So I did this twice because why not when I've got everything out and sitting here. Plus I never have enough thank you cards. Plus this is the type of card that's pretty easy to mass produce, really. You could even skip the coloring and you could stamp this image. I was thinking too, I was like, again, if I had more hours in the day, the size of this image is just about 4¼ inches tall. So I was like, oh, if you just stamped it repeatedly next to each other, you could create like a fabulous background with this. Again, I need more hours in the day, but I'll give you guys the extra ideas because why not? So after I was done coloring it, same thing, restamped it. Set that aside. I then took the solid big thanks image. There's a solid and there's an outline. I also thought about like, ooh, I could stamp the outline. I could paint that as well. Or heat emboss the outline and then paint it with like one of my like aqua shimmer pens, make it glittery. Or you could stamp the solid, let it completely dry, stamp the outline right on top of it and heat emboss it. So many things. So many things. Anyway. I had like a rust color cardstock in my stash. Sadly, I do not have a link to this one. I've had this stuff for forever. It just goes with the pattern paper I'm going to use, or it went close enough. So I gold heat embossed the big solid thanks. So I'd use my anti-static powder tool. I stamped it a couple times with pigment ink. You could also use clear embossing ink. Either one works, or the oxide ink I'm going to use in a minute. Anything that, takes a while to dry. So I heat embossed it and then cut that out. And then I took one of the little companion sentiments from the set and I just stamped that onto scraps of the Desert Storm cardstock with that Fallen Leaves ink. And then that I just trimmed down with my paper trimmer. Once I have that stamped, I'm going to put my card bases into my MISTI, and my card bases are going to be top folding A2 cards. And I'm going to stamp that little like vine image with T-dye Distress Oxide ink. So stamp that right across. And again, this is where I was like, ooh, this would look really nice. Stamped multiple times, to create a background. So stamp that. And then I took another sentiment from that set, lined it up, and I'm going to stamp that with that Fallen Leaves ink right on top of it. And then do the same thing for my second card base. So for my card fronts, I pulled out some of my pattern paper. that I have been hoarding. It's the Honeybee Marvelous Moments pattern paper. That's what inspired the colors of this card. And yes, I actually cut into more pattern paper because I like to keep it. But anyway, trim down a few strips of the pattern papers, and then I'm just going to tear them to give them, a little bit of a fun edge. And then once the edges are torn, I'm going to adhere these to a panel of white cardstock that I trimmed down to smaller than my A2 card front. So I trim that down. I'm going to add my pattern papers, which I'm just going to glue down with some craft tacky glue. And then the vine image, I had originally I was originally going to just trim that down into, a strip as well and adhere it with pattern papers. But then changed my mind and trimmed it out, as you can see there on the screen. So I'd cut that out, and I'm going to adhere that on top of those pattern paper strips. So I'm going to get those adhered. I'll adhere my little companion sentiment. And then the heat emboss sentiment, I backed that with some thin foam squares. So it'll give it just a little bit of dimension, but not too bulky. So I pop my companion sentiment into place, remove the backing on those little foam squares. I'll pop this sentiment into place. And then this whole panel I had backed with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. So that also has a little bit of dimension. So peeled off that backing, popped that into place. I added some gems from my stash. I don't have a link for those either. Apologies. And paired these with some copper envelopes. And that was it. So, like I mentioned, this set is limited edition. I'll have a link to the set and all the other supplies that are available. I will link to. That'll be in the description box below the video, as well as picture links in my blog post, which will also be linked below. And thank you all so much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I very much appreciate it. And I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.